Your grandmother kept a paper sack of dried chicken neck skin on the back porch in August, and that sack was a snack. The skin had been salted heavy in 1958, laid on a tin sheet, and left for the sun to do the rest. Number 19 on this list cost 3 cents at the corner store and came in an oily can. Number 14 was a pork product so old that the woman in the kitchen had been taught to make it by her own mother in 1929. Number 9 on this list lived in a quart mason jar on a high shelf, the meat the color of a bruise. These 25 snacks were designed for one thing, keeping a working black family fed between 2 thin meals on a Tuesday. Hit subscribe and stay with us. Here are the 25 old African American snacks that sound fake but are totally real. Number 25, hot water cornbread. A grandmother in Greenville, Mississippi, stirred boiling water into a tin bowl of self-rising cornmeal until the dough turned hot and stiff in her hand. She slapped a thin patty between her palms and slid it into a cast iron skillet of bacon grease that had been sitting on the back of the stove since the Korean War. The patty hissed, browned, and was lifted out with a fork in under 3 minutes. Children ate it standing up at the kitchen table, dragging the crisp edge through a saucer of cane syrup. By 1964, the kitchen at Brenda Jackson's house in West Memphis was making 20 patties on a Saturday morning. The cornmeal cost almost nothing. The grease was free. A working family could eat for an hour on what cost a nickel. That crunch outside, the soft hot center inside, that's the whole appeal. You don't need a fork. You don't need a plate. The patty cools in your hand on the back porch. Number 24, parched peanuts in a brown paper sack. Your grandmother bought a pound of raw peanuts from the black-owned grocer on the corner, dumped them on a sheet pan, and roasted them dry in a 350-degree oven until the shells turned brittle and the kitchen smelled like a circus tent. She poured them into a brown paper sack folded twice at the top. The sack went in your school satchel with a thumbprint of butter on the side from the biscuits she also packed. Children cracked the shells with their teeth and spit the husk into a tin pail under the desk. A pound of raw peanuts cost 20 cents in 1957 and lasted a child a school week. The skins came off black and dry. The salt your grandmother shook on at the end was the only seasoning. That was enough. Modern grocery stores sell the same peanut, roasted in a factory, in a foil bag for 9 times the money. Number 23, the sugar sandwich. A piece of soft white bread, a smear of margarine from a tin tub, and a heavy dusting of cane sugar pressed into the margarine until the slice glittered. Your great-grandmother folded it once, never twice, and handed it to you at the screen door. The sandwich cost about a penny in 1953. It carried a working family's child from the end of school until supper at 6. Mothers in Birmingham, Mobile, and Selma packed 2 of them in your lunch tin with a thermos of cold milk. The sweet hit your tongue first. The bread softened against the roof of your mouth. The margarine left a slick that clung to your fingers for an hour. Pediatricians today would faint. In a black household in 1953, it wasn't shameful. It was the working answer to a child running through your grandmother's kitchen at 4 in the afternoon, asking for something cheap, something fast, something filling. Number 22, tea cakes. Not cookies, not cake. A soft, biscuit-textured round of flour and sugar and a whisper of nutmeg, baked in a wood oven on a Saturday afternoon and stored in a tin lined with wax paper. Big Mama in Tuskegee made 40 of them on a single Sunday morning in 1961, and the children of the house ate every last one before Wednesday. The recipe came from her own mother, a woman born enslaved in Alabama who had only flour, lard, sugar, and a little nutmeg to work with after the Civil War. A tea cake was the simplest sweet thing a black family could make, and that was the point. Children ate them at church on Sunday afternoon Women ate them with coffee at the kitchen table at 6 in the morning. The tin sat on top of the icebox for 40 years in some houses. The tea cake outlasted the icebox. Number 21, pickled pig feet from a glass jar. The jar sat on the counter at the corner store in Memphis with a yellow handwritten price tag stuck to the lid. 20 cents a foot in 1962. The brine was vinegar and salt and a hard red color from the chilies floating at the bottom. Your uncle pulled one out with a long wooden tongs, dropped it on a square of butcher paper, and ate it standing in the doorway with the saltine in his other hand. The cartilage was soft. The skin was rubbery and tart. The vinegar made your eyes water on your first bite. By your third bite, you were chewing the way an old man chews. A working man on a Friday afternoon could buy a foot, a pack of saltines, and a Coca-Cola for under 50 cents. That's the snack that walked him from the mill to your grandmother's supper table. Number 20, Fatback chew. A strip of salt-cured pork fat pulled out of the brine bucket, sliced thin, and laid on a cloth on the back porch to dry. The strip went hard the way a piece of leather goes hard. Your grandfather kept a few in his shirt pocket on a long tractor day in 1948, the way a modern man keeps a granola bar. The salt drew the water out of his mouth. The fat coated his throat. A man could chew a strip for 2 hours in a hot field and not get hungry. Children chewed them on the porch after school, hands sticky with grease. The strips kept for weeks in a tin on the kitchen counter. The cure was the salt, the dry porch air, and the time. By 1980, doctors were calling salt pork a cardiovascular crime. The men who carried Fatback through the Mississippi Delta lived into their 80s on a diet of greens, cornbread, and pork fat. The research walked back its warnings one decade at a time, and the man who chewed the strip in 1948 had been right the whole way through. Number 19, sardines on a saltine. A lumberyard worker in Mobile, Alabama, came home at 6 in the evening on a Tuesday in 1959 and pulled a flat tin of King Oscar sardines out of the icebox. He rolled the lid back with the little metal key, tipped the oily fish onto a stack of saltines on a plate, and ate them at the kitchen table with a glass of buttermilk. The whole snack cost 15 cents. The tin had 3-cent sardines in it. The saltines came out of a sleeve that cost a dime, and the buttermilk was poured from a glass milk bottle that the dairyman left on the porch every other morning. His son sat across from him and ate the same thing. 2 saltines, 1 sardine, a swallow of buttermilk, and the kitchen was quiet for the 10 minutes the snack lasted. The little tin keys piled up in a coffee can on the counter all year, and at Christmas, the boys in the house strung them on a wire and made a wine chime out of them. What most people miss is this. By 1972, nutritionists were quietly recommending oily fish for heart health, the very food that working black families had been eating out of 3-cent tins for 40 years. The sardine had been working harder than anyone realized. The bones held calcium soft enough to chew through. The oil carried omega-3, and the flesh delivered a clean protein. The man at the table did not know any of those words. He knew the can opened with a key, the saltine carried the oil to his mouth without making a mess, and the buttermilk washed it all down. He had been eating the same snack since 1929, and his own father had eaten it since 1908. The grocer on Davis Avenue stocked the same brand for 60 years. He paid in nickels and dimes pulled from a coffee tin in the kitchen drawer. He always said the same thing as he ate. The fish had walked further than he ever would. That was the whole accounting. Number 18, butter rolls. Soft biscuit dough rolled out thin, brushed with butter, dusted heavy with cane sugar and a little cinnamon, rolled into a log, sliced into rounds, baked in a pan with a splash of milk poured over the top before they hit the oven. A grandmother in Atlanta pulled them out on a Saturday afternoon and the kitchen smelled like a bakery. You stood at the counter waiting for the pan to cool enough that you could pick one up without burning your fingers. The roll was sticky on the bottom from the milk and sugar, soft in the middle, crisp on the top edge. A pan of 12 butter rolls cost about 30 cents to make in 1956 and disappeared in a single afternoon. She didn't write the recipe down because the dough was the same biscuit dough she made every morning. Modern grocery store cinnamon rolls cost $5 for 6 and taste like cardboard. Her pan in 1956 was the original. Number 17, peanut brittle from a tin. A wide, flat tin sat in your aunt's kitchen pantry in Macon, Georgia, lined with wax paper, holding a single sheet of dark amber peanut brittle that had been broken into uneven shards. She made it on a Sunday afternoon in 1955 by boiling sugar, corn syrup, and a half pound of raw peanuts in a heavy pot until the sugar turned the color of a copper penny. She poured it onto a buttered marble slab, let it cool, and broke it with the back of a spoon. The shards went into the tin with a sheet of wax paper between every layer. The tin lived in the pantry until Christmas, and your aunt handed a piece to every child who came through her back door. The peanut was black food brought from West Africa in the holds of slave ships and grown across the Black Belt for 300 years. The brittle was your family's answer to a candy bar. Number 16, molasses on a biscuit. A grandmother in Charleston cracked open a leftover breakfast biscuit at 4 in the afternoon, drizzled the blackstrap molasses across the soft-cut side, and pressed the two halves back together. The molasses ran down a child's wrist before the first bite. Blackstrap was the cheap end of the sugar refining process, the byproduct your ancestors had been given as rations in the cane fields of the Caribbean and Louisiana for 200 years. By 1962, food research found that blackstrap held more iron, calcium, and magnesium than any other sweetener on the grocery shelf. Your grandmother did not need a journal. She had been giving it to anemic children on biscuits since 1928. The bite was bitter and sweet at the same time, the biscuit dense and crumbly. Children walked off the back porch chewing, the dark stain still on their fingers. A jar of blackstrap cost $0.25 and lasted a household 3 months. Number 15, fried bologna, folded in white bread. A square slice of ring bologna cut from a tube wrapped in red plastic, dropped in a hot cast iron skillet with a film of bacon grease, fried until the edges curled up like a little brown bowl. Your mother slid the slice between 2 pieces of soft white bread, slathered the bread with mustard, and handed it to you on the back step in 1965. The bologna cost 40 cents a pound at the corner store on Beale Street. A pound made 8 sandwiches. Each sandwich fed you for 2 hours. The bread soaked up the grease at the edge. The mustard cut the fat. Crispy bologna had a taste no modern lunch meat can match. Smoky and salty and a little sweet, and it cost less than a dime per sandwich to put together. The cast iron skillet that fried it was the same one that fried it for your mother in 1942. Number 14, hog head cheese on a saltine. The head cheese sat in a square aluminum pan in the icebox at a kitchen in Selma, Alabama, a wobbling block of pork meat suspended in a clear gelatin made from boiling a pig's head down for 10 hours on a wood stove. The cook had learned the recipe from her own mother in 1929, and she had passed it to her own daughter in 1958. On a Tuesday afternoon, she sliced a thin square off the block, laid it on a saltine, dotted it with hot sauce from a glass bottle, and handed it to a child standing at the kitchen counter. The slice held its shape for 10 seconds and then started to melt in the warm air. The taste was every part of the pig at once: the cheek, the tongue, the ears, the snout, all cooked down with bay leaves and black pepper and red pepper flakes until the meat fell off the bone in shreds. She poured the seasoned shreds into a pan with the strained broth and chilled it overnight in the icebox. Cajun households called it Souse and ate it the same way. Black households across the South called it head cheese and ate it the same way. The pig had given everything. The cook had wasted nothing. A snack was a working family's answer to a pig that had cost the household $12 in 1958, the price of 3 days of wages at the lumber yard. Every part of the animal had to feed somebody. The block in the pan fed a household of 7 for a week of after-school snacks. Saltines cost $0.10 a sleeve. Hot sauce cost $0.25 a bottle. The head cheese cost the labor of a Saturday morning at the wood stove. A child eating that slice in 1958 was eating 400 years of forced ingenuity. A wood stove, a pig's head, a handful of pepper, time, patience. A working memory of a woman in Alabama who had figured it out before the lights came on. The part most people miss is this: none of these snacks were invented for shock value. They came from a kitchen that wasted nothing. Number 13, boiled peanuts in a quart mason jar. A cook in Charleston pulled green raw peanuts straight from a farmer's burlap sack at the market in August, dropped 2 pounds of them in a heavy pot, covered them with water, dumped a half cup of salt in, and boiled them for 4 hours on the back of the stove. The shells went soft. The peanuts inside turned the texture of a cooked bean. She ladled them hot into mason jars, screwed on the lids, and the jars lined the pantry shelf for the rest of the year. A child pulled a jar down on a hot Sunday afternoon in 1960 and ate a fistful straight out of the brine, sucking the salty water off the soft shells before cracking them open with his teeth. The practice came over from West Africa in the holds of slave ships. Your kin had eaten them on the porch in 1899. Modern Carolina's gas stations sell them in a styrofoam cup for $4. Number 12, souse meat on a slice of light bread. The souse came from the black-owned butcher on the corner, sliced thin from a long loaf made of pork tongue, ears, and snout suspended in vinegar gelatin. A mother in Houston laid 2 slices on a piece of soft white bread, cut the sandwich diagonally, and packed it in a paper bag for her son on a school trip in 1968. The slices were the color of a pink pencil eraser, dotted with darker pieces of meat. The vinegar and the gelatin made the bread go a little limp by lunchtime. The crackers in some households replaced the bread, and a working family ate the same snack at the kitchen table standing up. Souse cost 40 cents a pound at the butcher in 1968, and a pound made 14 sandwiches. The butcher kept the long loaves on a wooden board behind the glass case, sliced fresh on a hand crank machine while you waited at the counter. Modern delicatessens charge $9 a pound for the same product, sliced by a machine that does not know any of the people who used to make it. Number 11, pickled beet egg. A glass jar on the kitchen counter held a dozen hard-boiled eggs floating in a brine of vinegar, sugar, and the cooking liquid from a can of beets. The eggs turned a deep magenta on the outside, ran pink through the white, and the yolk stayed yellow at the very center. Your aunt dropped a jar on the counter on a Sunday afternoon, and a child fished an egg out with a long fork, salt shaker in the other hand. The egg had taken 3 days to color through. The taste was sour and sweet at the same time, with the chalky yolk softening the vinegar bite. A dozen eggs cost 45 cents in 1959. A can of beets was a dime. The brine was a thrift trick borrowed from German Pennsylvania households into black households across the Upper South in the early 20th century. The egg had become black food, the way every borrowed thing becomes black food, by sitting on a kitchen counter for 50 years. Number 10, hoe cake with cane syrup. a flat round of cornmeal batter cooked on the underside of a hoe over a wood fire, then over a cast iron griddle, then by 1955 on a heavy skillet on a kitchen stove. Your grandmother in Vicksburg poured a thin yellow circle of batter into the hot grease and flipped it after 90 seconds. The hoe cake came off the skillet a pale gold, the edges crisp and lacy. She poured a tablespoon of dark cane syrup across the top, watched it pool, and slid the hoe cake onto a saucer. The syrup soaked into the warm corn underneath. A child ate the whole thing with their hands, holding the saucer underneath like a plate. The hoe cake had crossed the ocean from the Bantu peoples of West Africa, where ground millet had been cooked the same way for 1,000 years. The cornmeal was the New World substitution. The cane syrup came from black sugar mills in Louisiana. Every part of the snack was black labor turned into black food. Number 9, pickled pig ears. A quart mason jar on a high pantry shelf at a kitchen in Macon held 6 pig ears, suspended in a dark red vinegar brine the color of a bruise. The cook had bought them at the black-owned butcher on the corner in 1963 for $0.10 each, scrubbed them, simmered them in salt water for 2 hours, and packed them in the jar with vinegar, hot peppers, garlic, and bay leaves. The brine seeped into the cartilage for a month before she pulled the first ear out. A working uncle dropped by on a Saturday afternoon, sliced an ear into thin strips, laid the strips on a piece of soft bread, and ate it standing at the kitchen counter with hot sauce in his other hand. The ear was rubbery. The cartilage popped between his teeth. The vinegar bit his tongue. Modern grocery stores sell pig ears in the dog food aisle. Your grandmother sold them out of a jar on her counter for $0.25 a slice. Number 8, salt pork strip. A 2-inch strip of salt-cured pork belly, sliced off a slab kept wrapped in butcher paper in the icebox, fried hard in a dry skillet until it crackled. Your grandfather pulled a strip out of the skillet with a fork in 1951, laid it on a piece of newsprint to drain, and ate it standing at the back screen door of your kitchen in Greenwood, Mississippi. The strip was the color of a copper penny on the outside, white and chewy in the middle, salty enough to make a working man's eyes water. Salt pork cost about 10 cents a pound in 1951, and a slab lasted your household 2 weeks of snacks and seasoning. The same strip flavored a pot of beans, a pot of greens, and a pot of cornbread on a single Sunday afternoon. A working family couldn't afford to waste a pound of fat. You ate the burnt little bits called cracklings out of the bottom of the skillet with a teaspoon. Number 7, Benny wafers. Thin, brittle, the color of a brown paper sack, sweet from cane sugar and earthy from a heavy dose of toasted sesame seeds. Benny was the West African word for sesame, brought across the Atlantic on slave ships in the late 17th century and planted in Charleston soil where it survived for 300 years. A baker in Charleston rolled the dough out paper thin in 1962, cut it into rounds with a juice glass, baked them in a slow oven for 15 minutes, and stored them in a tin under the kitchen counter. The wafer cracked the moment your teeth touched it, and the sesame stuck to your tongue for a minute after. A pinch of sea salt at the end made the sweet taste twice as sweet. The wafer was the only American snack that traced its lineage in an unbroken line from a West African village to a Charleston pantry. 5 women in 5 kitchens had baked the same recipe across as many lifetimes. Number 6, neckbone gnaw. After the Sunday supper pot of neck bones and rice had cooled at a kitchen in St. Louis, a cook pulled the picked over bones out of the pot, laid them on a sheet of newsprint, and the children gathered around. Each child got a bone with a strand of meat still clinging to it and a knot of cartilage at the end. They sat on the back step and gnawed. The marrow inside was warm. The cartilage softened in the mouth and was chewed and swallowed. Working black families did not let a bone go to waste. A pound of neck bones cost 12 cents at the butcher in 1953 and fed a family of 7 the meat for Sunday dinner and the gnaw for Sunday afternoon. The bones were a snack inside a meal. The neighbors heard the children laughing on the back step and knew what was on the newsprint. Modern restaurants serve roasted bone marrow on a wooden plank for $19. Black kitchens serve the same nutrition on a sheet of newsprint for free. Number 5, raw sweet potato slice with salt. A cook in Atlanta peeled a raw sweet potato on a Tuesday afternoon in 1958, cut it into thin coins, laid them on a plate, and shook a heavy pinch of salt across the top. You sat on the back porch and ate the coins one at a time, the way a modern child eats potato chips. The flesh was crunchy and sweet at the same time, the kind of sweet that doesn't announce itself the way a piece of candy does. The salt drew the water out of the slice and made the sweetness sharper. A sweet potato cost a nickel in 1958. A pound went a long way. Working black families had been eating sweet potatoes since West African yams ran out in the holds of slave ships, and Carolina farmers had handed enslaved people the next closest thing. That's the simplest possible snack. No fire, no pot, a knife, a pinch of salt, your back porch. Number 4, cornbread crumbled in a glass of buttermilk. Your grandfather and Selma poured a tall glass of cold buttermilk on a hot evening in 1956, broke up 2 squares of leftover cornbread into the glass with his fingers, stirred it with a long spoon, and drank the whole thing in 5 minutes on the back porch with the screen door open. The buttermilk was sour, the cornbread softened against the inside of the glass and turned into a mush you ate with the spoon at the end. The drink was older than the kitchen it was made in. Enslaved field workers had eaten the same combination at noon in a tin cup in 1855. 300 years of farm work powered by a glass of soured milk and a handful of crumbled cornbread. A quart of buttermilk cost 20 cents in 1956. A pan of cornbread cost a dime to make. The whole snack carried a working man through the 4 hours between supper and bedtime. Number 3, penny candy from the corner store. A glass jar on the counter at the black-owned grocery on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta held Mary Janes wrapped in yellow and red paper, peanut chews, root beer barrels, and squirrel-shaped peanut clusters. You handed over a nickel in 1962 and walked out with 5 pieces, 1 of each, in a tiny brown paper sack folded twice at the top. The Mary Jane was a peanut butter taffy that stuck to your molars for an hour and pulled out a baby tooth on the way down. The peanut chew was a bar of peanut and dark molasses. The root beer barrel cracked between your teeth and turned to syrup. The corner store ran on a quarter's worth of children every afternoon for 50 years, and a black-owned grocery on the corner of every black neighborhood in America made its rent on the candy jar. A nickel in your hand was a power that grocery store owners understood. Number 2, cracklings out of a paper sack. The morning a hog was rendered for lard in a backyard in rural Alabama, a cook fished the crisp golden pieces of skin and fat out of the cast iron pot, drained them on a newsprint sheet, salted them heavy, and packed them in a brown paper sack. By the afternoon, the bag was greasy through, and the sack walked from the back porch to the front yard in the hand of every child for generations. The crackling shattered between the teeth. The fat coated the tongue. The salt drew the water out of the mouth. A working family rendered a hog twice a year, and the cracklings from a single rendering filled 4 sacks. The same skin in a modern grocery store, fried in a factory in Tennessee, and packed in a foil bag, cost $4 for 2 ounces. The cook gave the bag away. Number 1, the chicken neck skin. Chew. The skin had been pulled off the neck of a Sunday stew bird at a kitchen in Tuskegee in 1957, salted heavy, laid on a tin sheet, and left in the August sun on the back porch for a day and a night. By the next afternoon, the skin was hard the way a piece of beef jerky is hard, dry, and salty, and a little sweet from the sugar rubbed in with the salt. The cook stored the strips in a paper sack on the kitchen counter. A child grabbed a strip on the way out the door to school, the way a modern child grabs a granola bar. The salt cured the meat and pulled the water out, the way every working culture cured every cut of every animal for 10,000 years before refrigeration. Nothing about this snack sounded fake to the woman who made it. It was a working answer to a chicken that had to feed 7 people on a Tuesday.
Molasses pull candy turned an ordinary evening into a celebration of sticky fun and family patience. Thick molasses was boiled until it reached a glossy stage, then poured onto buttered pans to cool just enough for handling. Children and adults buttered their hands and began the long, rhythmic process of pulling and folding the warm candy until it turned a light golden color and grew chewy. The sweet strands stretched like ribbons, twisting into shapes that hardened into bite-sized treats once cooled. Autumn was the favorite season for this ritual, when cool air helped the candy set and neighbors gathered for the show. The smell of molasses clung to clothing and hair, a sugary perfume that marked a good night well spent. Every piece carried a hint of smoke from the kettle and a memory of shared laughter. Modern kitchens rarely see such slow, hands-on candy making, but those who remember know the pull of tradition is as strong as the candy itself.
Butter rice with fried eggs was breakfast, lunch, and dinner, depending on what the family needed and what the pantry held. Mothers would cook rice until fluffy, then stir in generous amounts of butter until each grain glistened and carried that rich, creamy flavor. A fried egg was placed. On top is runny yolk breaking open to create a natural sauce that children mixed eagerly into the rice below. Some mothers added a splash of soy sauce or a sprinkle of black pepper for extra depth. This dish was the answer when money was tight but bellies needed filling, providing protein and carbohydrates in one inexpensive bowl. Children loved the ritual of breaking the yolk themselves, watching it flow golden across the butter-slicked grains. It was honest, humble food that required no pretense but delivered complete satisfaction. Frozen Kool-Aid cups turned a 5-cent packet of drink mix into a summer business that kept entire blocks buzzing. Every neighborhood had a house where somebody's mama filled Dixie cups with Kool-Aid, stuck in popsicle sticks, and sold them off the porch for a dime. Cherry was the best seller, grape ran second, tropical punch was for the bold. You mixed it stronger than the packet said, doubled the sugar, poured slow so the stick stayed centered while the cups froze overnight. By noon, kids lined up on the sidewalk with coins earned sweeping porches or returning bottles. The trick was peeling the cup without breaking the ice. Squeeze just right, let the edges give, pull the paper down in one strip. Some bit straight through, others licked slow, letting the color stain their lips purple for hours. It was a childhood economy built on sugar, ice, and 5-cent packets, and every kid on the block knew exactly which house had the coldest cups.
Buttermilk cornbread sticks brought the smell of hot iron and sweet corn to countless African-American kitchens, where cast iron molds shaped each piece into crisp-edged fingers perfect for dipping. The batter of stone-ground cornmeal, tangy buttermilk, and a little lard was poured into sizzling molds so the edges crackled as soon as they touched the heat. Children loved pulling the golden sticks apart, steam rising as they slathered honey butter across the ridges. They were the ideal companion to collard greens or a simple bowl of beans, hearty enough to stand alone as a snack when money was scarce. Street vendors sold them wrapped in newspaper at church homecomings, and neighbors traded secrets about which cornmeal gave the best crunch. The sound of batter meeting hot iron became a music of its own, echoing through small kitchens on quiet evenings. Today, these molds often sit forgotten in cupboards, but a warm cornbread stick still delivers a taste of the past that is both humble and magnificent.
Hoppin' John rice was more than food in African American households. It was tradition, luck, and heritage served in a single pot. Black-eyed peas, simmered with ham hocks or bacon until tender, their cooking liquid becoming a rich, smoky broth. Rice was added directly to the pot, absorbing those flavors as it cooked until each grain was infused with the essence of pork and pepper. Mothers made this dish on New Year's Day for prosperity, but children begged for it year-round because the taste was simply irresistible. The peas were believed to represent coins, bringing fortune to those who ate them, but the real treasure was the flavor itself. Served with cornbread on the side, this was a complete meal that cost almost nothing to prepare. Hoppin' John connected generations, carrying recipes passed down through oral tradition. Peanut butter and jelly on saltine crackers was what happened when the bread ran out, but hunger didn't. You spread peanut butter on one cracker, grape jelly on the other, pressed them together, and hoped it held. It rarely did. The saltines snapped under the weight, and you'd eat the whole thing in pieces, licking your fingers between bites. But the salt cut through the sweet jelly in a way soft bread never managed. In the 1960s, a box of saltines cost 15 cents and peanut butter ran about a quarter, making this one of the cheapest protein snacks a mother could stock. Kids ate these after school, before dinner, and sometimes instead of dinner when weeks ran long. Crackers stayed crisp for weeks. Peanut butter didn't need the icebox, and the jelly lasted until the jar was scraped clean with a spoon. Tomato rice carried the bright tang of canned tomatoes mixed into fluffy grains, a dish that children either loved immediately or grew to crave. Mothers would saute onions in bacon grease until soft, then add canned tomatoes and let them break down into a fragrant sauce. Rice was stirred in and cooked slowly, absorbing every drop of that tangy, sweet liquid until each grain turned a beautiful sunset orange. Some families added sugar to balance acidity, while others preferred natural sharpness that cut through heavier dishes. It was often served alongside fried fish or pork chops, but children happily ate bowls of it alone. Tomato rice was inexpensive, using pantry staples that cost pennies but delivered comfort worth far more. This dish taught children that simple ingredients created memorable meals.
Spiced pecan pralines once lined church fundraising tables and family picnic baskets with their glossy sweetness and gentle crunch. Whole pecans were toasted until fragrant, then coated in a bubbling mixture of brown sugar, butter, and warm spices like cinnamon and clove. The candy cooled into soft clusters that broke apart with a satisfying snap, each bite a perfect balance of nutty richness and spiced caramel. Volunteers wrapped the pralines in wax paper or tucked them into small paper bags, selling them to raise money for community projects or simply to share a taste of love. Children waited eagerly for the last bits left to harden on the pan, scraping every sticky corner. Their aroma filled kitchens long after the candy was gone, a scent of celebration and togetherness. Today, store-bought sweets rarely capture that handmade charm, but the memory of spiced pecan pralines still carries the warmth of fellowship and the pride of a well-kept family recipe.
Rice and gravy was the ultimate weeknight rescue, a dish that turned leftover pan drippings into liquid gold poured over fluffy white rice. Black mothers knew nothing should be wasted after frying pork chops or chicken, so they added flour to the pan and stirred until browned. Milk or water was whisked in slowly, creating thick, savory gravy that bubbled while the rice steamed nearby. The combination was simple but satisfying, offering protein-rich flavor without requiring another piece of meat. Children loved how the gravy soaked into each grain, turning plain rice into something rich and comforting. This dish represented the resourcefulness of African American kitchens, where flavor was built from what others might discard. It was frugal cooking at its finest, proving that ingenuity mattered more than expensive ingredients. Before lunch, money was a guarantee. Syrup sandwiches filled the gap between hunger and the next real meal. 2 slices of white bread, a heavy pour of Cairo syrup or dark cane syrup, pressed together and wrapped in wax paper for school. The bread went soft and sticky within minutes, part of the appeal for little hands that liked pulling it apart in sweet, doughy strings. In the 1950s, a bottle of Cairo cost less than 20 cents and stretched across a week of snacks for 3 or 4 kids. Dark syrup carried a caramel note with a faint bitterness that balanced the sweetness. Light was milder, preferred by the younger ones. No one bragged about eating syrup sandwiches. It was the kind of snack made quietly on afternoons when the icebox held nothing else. But decades later, grown men and women speak of it with something close to reverence, because that sandwich meant somebody made sure you didn't go without.
Sweet potato tea cakes were once the pride of community bake sales and Sunday socials, a simple cookie that carried the fragrance of home in every bite. Mashed sweet potato gave the dough a gentle orange hue and natural sweetness, while molasses and warm spices like cinnamon and nutmeg filled kitchens with an autumn scent no matter the season. Grandmothers stirred the batter with wooden spoons worn smooth from years of use, passing quiet wisdom to the children who helped scoop each round onto greased pans. The cakes baked into soft, slightly chewy circles that could be eaten plain or brushed with a thin sugar glaze if the family had a little extra. Churchgoers wrapped them in brown paper to sell for mission fundraisers, and travelers carried a few in coat pockets for long train rides when cafe prices were too high. Today, their memory lingers mostly in handwritten recipe cards tucked inside family Bibles. Tasting one now would be like opening a window to the warmth of a kitchen filled with laughter, hymn humming, and the sweet comfort of community spirit.
Rice pudding for breakfast was a sweet morning treat that turned last night's leftover rice into something children woke up excited to eat. Mothers would warm the rice in a pot with milk, sugar, cinnamon, and a touch of vanilla until it became creamy and fragrant. Some added raisins or a pat of butter, stirring until everything melted together into comfort. The pudding was served warm in bowls, sometimes with an extra drizzle of condensed milk for families who could afford the luxury. Children loved that something as ordinary as leftover rice could be transformed into dessert they were allowed to eat before school. This dish embodied the African American philosophy of wasting nothing and finding joy in reinvention. It was practical magic, turning yesterday's side dish into today's beloved breakfast.
Tea time. Lemon chess squares carried the tang of fresh citrus into parlors where neighbors gathered for quiet afternoon visits. Based on the old-fashioned chess pie, these bars combined tart lemon juice with sugar, eggs, and a touch of cornmeal to create a dense, custardy filling. Poured over a simple shortbread crust and baked until golden, the squares were sliced neatly and dusted with a whisper of powdered sugar if it could be spared. Their bright flavor cut through the heaviness of traditional sweets, offering a refreshing note that matched the clink of teacups and the soft murmur of conversation. Hostesses prized the recipe because it kept well at room temperature and could be prepared a day ahead, making it perfect for church socials and family reunions. Children who tasted them for the first time often asked for seconds, surprised by the burst of sunshine flavor. Though rarely baked now, these squares remain a symbol of hospitality and quiet elegance, a reminder that a little lemon and patience could turn humble ingredients into something unforgettable.
Dirty rice earned its name from the ground meat and chicken livers that gave it a speckled, earthy appearance no child could resist. Mothers would brown ground beef or pork with finely chopped livers, onions, celery, and bell peppers until the mixture was deeply savory. Rice was cooked separately, then folded into the meat mixture with Cajun seasonings that brought gentle heat and bold flavor. The dish stretched a small amount of meat across a large pot, making it economical enough for weekly suppers. Children who claimed to hate liver never suspected it was hidden in every delicious bite, and mothers kept that secret with knowing smiles. Dirty rice was Cajun tradition, adopted and adapted by Black families throughout Louisiana and beyond. It proved that the best flavors often came from the humblest ingredients.
Peanut brittle with sorghum was the kind of candy that snapped between your teeth and stuck in your memory long after the last piece was gone. Farm families boiled sorghum syrup until it bubbled thick and dark, its grassy sweetness richer than plain sugar. Roasted peanuts were stirred in quickly, the hot mixture poured across buttered pans and spread thin with the back of a spoon. Children waited wide-eyed as the candy cooled, eager to crack off shiny amber shards that caught the light like stained glass. Revival gatherings and county fairs always had a table piled high with these sweet, brittle sheets, often wrapped in wax paper tied with string. The sorghum not only gave a deeper flavor, but also reflected the ingenuity of cooks who relied on what they could grow rather than expensive, refined sugar. Each bite carried the flavor of late summer fields and long evenings under oil lamps. To taste it again would be to remember the easy companionship of neighbors sharing stories while the brittle snapped between happy hands.
These 25 snacks were built on a kitchen that wasted nothing and a back porch that did the curing for free. The pig ear, the chicken neck skin, everyone was a working answer to a household that ate twice a day. Tell us in the comments which one your kin made. In Macon, in Charleston, in St. Louis, pull a sweet potato out this week and eat a coin of it raw with salt. Sit on the back step, not in front of your television. None of these were invented for shock value. They came from a cupboard that ran short and a household where the children kept growing.